Hey, it's the truth anyway, and I'm PK. Welcome to our podcast. My name is Kelly Metters. I'm the lead pastor of Connect Church here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm so glad you're joining with us today. And joining with us today is our executive pastor, Pastor Lindley Rochelle. Welcome, Lindley.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good to have you with us on the
Glad
podcast.
to be here.
This is your initial visit to the podcast
Here
today.
we go.
Here we go.
Let's do this.
Lindley, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Why don't we start there?
Well, I was born at a very early age. Okay, never mind.
I was born at an early
yeah,
age.
there you
That's
go.
great.
My
Weren't
father-
we all, Lindley?
There
We
you
have
go.
that in common.
Sorry, get it from my father. I do. Well, gee, in a nutshell, I gave my heart to the Lord when I was 10. My father was a pastor, and I've known the Lord pretty much all my life, except 10 in age. I'm 61 now, so it's been a long time. But I'm here today to talk about honoring our father and mother, and me and my sister and brother have had just some really interesting events over the last 11 years with them.
Sure.
And I just want to share today with you all about honoring your mother and father in their aging years. And it's taken a lot to learn how to do that on our end. As far as my personal experience goes with that, I just want to say that I'm grateful to have been raised in a loving home that loved the Lord, so that we have some foundations on where to go with this in this stage of our lives. And I was telling you before we started this, that this is not really a testimony, because we're still in the middle of this. And when I say
Right.
we, I'm talking about me and my brother and my sister.
Sure. My family's in a very similar position.
And as far as the history goes with Connect Church and me and Nathan being here, I just wanted to remind you of one of the reasons, or one of the many reasons, that we decided to hook in with Connect Church years ago was in 2011, we moved our parents from Orlando, and I say we again, my sister and brother moved them from Orlando to Sanford. In 2014, the Lord had told us to move to a different church, and so we were looking for a different church while my parents were going through some severe issues and illnesses. So we weren't hooked in with a church for about 6 months. And on a Sunday, I had to go down to help them because my mother had been in hospice, and they were doing stroke tracking for my father. So I had one parent in one hospital in Orlando, another parent in another hospital in Orlando, and I was at a doctor's office trying to coordinate something. But the stress was really intense for me at that point. And I was in the doctor's office just waiting I forget now what I was waiting for, but the phone rang. And I didn't recognize the phone number. And of course, at that point, you're answering all phones because you
Right.
don't know who's calling for what.
Right.
And it was you. It was the pastor of the church that we had just visited twice, maybe 3 times. And you said, "Hey, is this Lindley?" And I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Who's this?" And you said, "Oh, well," you said, "This is Pastor Kelly. I'm with Connect Church." And I remember just breaking down crying because I was in such a crux of not knowing what to do with my parents, that your phone call at that time just meant the world to me and to Nathan, that you were calling me to welcome us to the church, but then you prayed with me when I needed prayer.
I remember that. Now, I hadn't thought about that in years. I had forgotten about that.
That just meant a lot to me, that I was in a place where the Holy Spirit could speak to the pastor who didn't know me. You didn't know who we were, but God knew that I needed that at that time, and for my parents. So that's just been a lot to me. So I wanted to say that to the world today, that I
That's
appreciated
pretty
that
awesome.
call that you made.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad I made it
Yeah, right.
because you guys are like just key people, instrumental in what the Lord's doing here. So I'm glad I made that phone call.
Well, my mother went through hospice, and that was 2015, 2016, and she is alive today.
Right.
It certainly did something different to her brain, which is why we now have guardianship over her. My father has since passed. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and he did it taking care of my mom, which is part of the things that we had to honor them with, to let him
Sure.
do what he wanted to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Your dad, how long had your dad been a pastor for? Your dad had been a pastor for
Oh my goodness.
50 years?
I think 50 years. He retired at age 78.
It's like the CIA. You don't really,
Yeah, they don't.
when you've been in ministry that long, you really don't
Yeah,
retire.
he did not retire ever. Truly, he didn't. Yeah.
You still get called up to do things. And, hey, can you be an interim pastor for us for the next 18 months?
Actually, I
that
think,
kind of thing.
I think it was 3 interim pastors. in his
Yeah,
retirement.
absolutely. I know
Yeah,
exactly what happens.
Yes, funerals, weddings, all that
So,
continues.
pastors, if you're not ready to retire, you might as well just stay at your church because they're going to get
It's
you to be
not
an
gonna
interim pastor
happen.
somewhere else. You might just stay at yours.
Exactly.
So, well, I've got some questions for you.
Sure.
I've got some questions for you because this subject is near and dear to my heart. You know, I have my mother and father are starting to age. My dad is in an assisted living facility, in a memory care assisted living facility. He has Parkinson's, advanced stage Parkinson's, and my mama has taken wonderful, wonderful care of him, but it's gotten to the point to where she physically can't.
Yes.
And so,
Right.
you know, I know that when you get to a place like that, it's difficult. So I can empathize with this situation and people in this situation. So here's a question for you. What do you think, what would you say the difference between honor and respect is? How do you show honor and respect to aging parents?
Well, I think respect is something that almost anybody can conjure up. You know, we can respect a police officer. We can respect a cashier who's checking us out at the grocery store. Just by nature of just recognizing that people are going to be people. Honor is something that comes from the heart. You know, the Bible talks about honoring your parents, honor thy father and mother, which is the 5th commandment.
Right.
It's the only commandment that comes with a promise.
That your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God has given you. Yeah.
Exactly. So I kind of feel like that's something we have to do on purpose and think about doing through loving them like Jesus would love them.
Let me ask you a question. And this is a little different than some of the questions I have. Do you think it's possible to honor your mother and father as their place as your mother and father without agreeing with all of their lifestyle choices, without agreeing with the way that you were raised or treated? Do you think it's possible to honor them?
I believe that it is so. It's interesting because my mother and I have always had a tumultuous relationship. It's just been that way. And I can remember my father giving me some advice when I was in 11th grade. My mother and I had a tremendous argument, and to this day I don't remember what it was. Sorry, Mom. But I remember bawling and crying, and I was having one of those sobbing cries, and women know what this is. You just can't stop it. It just kept welling up in me. I was so angry. And my father came in, and I was trying.
By the way, men know what that is too. They may not admit to it, but there are times.
Okay, it was one of those times. And I remember my father coming in, and I was trying to explain to him what was going on. And honestly, looking back, and I think that he would have agreed with me, but he didn't say that because he's not going to get in the middle. But he said to me, Lindley, it's not necessary that you agree with her, but it is necessary that you understand where she's coming from. And that has just carried with me through the years in all kinds of relationships. And now that I'm in this stage of being, I'm not the official guardian. My sister's the official guardianship just because of the way it lays out. She's older than me. But I am the support caregiver of my mom, so I'm involved with her caregiving, whereas my sister is as well, and my brother. But if I don't agree with her, the Lord is teaching me to understand her, where she's coming from, even if that is a false sense of reality. My mother does have some dementia symptoms, et cetera, and so she does have false sense of reality. But I can't argue with that. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm going to understand when she's coming from, even if it's from a false perspective. Or let's say it was something that was incorrect or not aligned with biblical things, I can still honor her through understanding where she's coming from.
I think that takes simply one thing, grace.
Hello.
I think
Yes.
that takes the grace of God, God's ability to do that.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, in our natural strength, it's very difficult to honor someone that you have a lot of disagreement
Correct.
with. Well, how do we show honor to our aging parents? How do we show respect to our, what would be an example of how we would do that?
Oh, there's all kinds of practical ways. But let me just preface that with what the Lord showed me. I mean, I just love the way the Lord talks to me sometimes about things He's showing me. It's not always this clear, but it was really clear to me at one point. There was a time I remember when my father was alive, and my sister and I and my brother, we would travel to Sanford. They lived in Sanford. We would keep 95 hot. Me and my sister and brother we were always going down there and taking care of them and fixing things and helping take care of them. At one point when my mother almost died with going through hospice, she got down to like 80 pounds, 75 pounds.
Wow.
And we were actually preparing her funeral. We were meeting with the end-of-life specialist to do this. And I was so
She fooled y'all, didn't she? Because that's been a while.
That's been a while. It's been a minute, yes. I remember driving up 95, and I was so overwhelmed with what needed to be done and not knowing what to do. Because, hey, we'd never done this before.
Sure.
You know, and if you're a caregiver, you're a support giver, you've got parents of this age, you can read all the books you want. It's like marriage. But doing is a whole different story. It really is. But I remember pulling off at the rest area on 95. There's one just 30 minutes outside of where we live on 95. And I got out to get me a cold drink and to basically debrief and just pray. Because I needed to we were busy with work here at my regular life up in Jacksonville, too. I kind of had to, get ready to come back into real life. But the Lord was telling me, He was talking to me about letting go. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about necessarily letting go of my mother to let her go on to live with the Lord, but to let my father go and let him do what he wanted to do to take care of my mom. Like, he was doing a lot of physical things. We were concerned about his health. That's why they were stroke tracking him. And so I had to learn how to let them do a lot of things that I thought was not good for them. You know, that parent-child role, they talk about it switches when you get older.
Sure.
I take an issue with that because not really. They're not my child. And I can't punish them for not obeying me like I can a child that I'm trying to instruct in the way that they should go. But I'm just saying the Lord gave me three things. He said, you've got to let them, you've got to listen to them, and then you've got to love them. And that, again, that letting goes back to maybe they were making decisions that I didn't think were good for their health. A very small thing, I remember my dad was eating ice cream at late night. He's a type 2, he was not a type 2 diabetic, but he had to watch the sugar as intake anyway. And we were like, Dad, you shouldn't eat the ice cream. And it's like, why not? He's 85. Let him eat the ice cream. You know, it's going to be okay. Or he was doing a lot of, Mother would give Dad a lot of instructions of cleaning the house. My mother was a very specific person, and it was wearing my father out. So we would tell Dad, don't do all that. It's okay. We can pay for someone to come in and clean the house. No, I want to do this. I want to do this. Had to learn to let go of that and let Dad do that. Gave him a sense of independence, and it's what he wanted. Right. And so why would I make his life, the rest of his life, miserable by making him do what I wanted him to do?
Well, at some point with our mothers and fathers, especially even when they're asking for advice, we have to come to the place that we realize, and even I think even as a parent with your kids, have to come to the place that you realize that God has given them a free will and a certain degree of autonomy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And at some point, when you're no longer responsible for that, you love them, but at some point, they're responsible for them.
They are, yes. Mm-hmm.
It's not our decisions to make.
Right.
Until those decisions are placed in our hands.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Until they're not able to make those decisions. But while they're able to make them, They are their decisions to make.
Let them
even
make
if it's
them.
not your decision. Even if it's not the way you would have them do it.
Yeah, that's part of the honoring is letting them. Now, of course, we do have to draw the line when we're talking about life or death.
Sure.
And I've told you this story before. Y'all were here when my dad passed in June of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
On July 1st, my mother, who's in a wheelchair, decided that she could drive the car, which she couldn't, but she convinced a neighbor to get her the keys and find her car. And she got in the car, and she had a wreck. She actually hit 4 cars within an hour.
Yep.
On on I-4 and 46
I
in
remember
Sanford.
that.
Yeah, I was here when they called me. And I remember, so I remember, too, another part of grace that I wasn't expecting. I was here in the office, and I got the phone call from my aunt saying, hey, your mom's been in a wreck. And I turn around, and Victoria says, you go. And I said, I have work I've got to finish. She says, no, you got to go. And she ushered me out here, and she told you that I was going.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
No, you have to leave.
Oh, yes. That was a blessing.
Yeah.
That was a blessing to know that I had the freedom or the grace to go and take care of my parents.
Absolutely.
Who needed that at that point. So that's hence why we sought guardianship, because Mother was unable to make those kind of life or death and decisions were not in her.
She wasn't
wheelhouse.
in a place to make them. Yeah, it was still. I remember her still insisting on making some of them. So
yes.
some of those decisions, if I'm going to be honest, it's probably not very nice to say.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Are a little amusing. I mean,
they were.
I mean, some of those decisions
she of all things is amusing. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I was hoping you'll take that wrong.
Oh, no,
I mean,
no.
my folks are in the same boat, and I'm
They
sure
are
I will be
amazing.
too. Well, let me ask you this: as our parents age, they begin to, like you say, things begin to change. It takes, there's a time when you're more involved with their life, a time when you might be less involved with their life, and then a time when you're more involved with their life in the end.
Yeah.
How do you set boundaries? Because there are boundaries that probably need to be set.
Yeah, and every situation is different. I know that for me, for a while, my mother was calling me and my sister and my brother like 3 and 4 times a day, repeating the same stories. And we would feel bad, or I would feel bad if I didn't pick up the phone right after my father passed away. Well, that went on. I don't know. I'm not sure how long that went on. But I finally got to where, honestly, for a while I wouldn't answer the phone. Now, not all day, but if she called 3 or 4 times in the hour, it was like,
Sure.
I love you, Mom, and I will get back with you. So it took, you kind of have to walk yourself through the guilt.
One of the things that I think that I've run into, I've been in ministry for like 35 years or something. I've been doing this a while.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's correct. At least 31 years or something like that. Been doing it a minute. One of the things that I've run into over the years is the dynamic of parents not understanding that at some point their adult children are no longer responsible to obey them.
Yes.
They're no longer responsible they're no longer in a place to demand of their adult children that they do things in a certain way. And they will inevitably quote to me, children obey your parents. That's right. Children obey your parents while they're children.
Yes.
But your adult child, your adult son, your adult daughter is no longer a child. That word is not just, that word children obey your parents is not just a relational thing. Like, well, they belong to me because I had them. It's a stage in life thing.
Right.
It's a maturity level thing. If you have a person who is a child who is not grown into a son, into a man, into an adult, a daughter that's grown into adulthood and is married or is looking to get married or is, they're no longer responsible before the Lord to obey a parent's every whim.
Right.
Everything that they think they should do. And a lot of people have a lot of problem with that. And it causes a lot of relational problems, and it causes people to interject into adult adult children's lives when they shouldn't. It causes people to do things like feel like they have a right to interject into their son or their daughter's marriage, or have an opinion over whether their son or daughter should be married or not be married, or how they should handle an adult married situation, whether that adult child and their husband, adult child and their wife should move, or whether they should have kids, or whether they should. There's a point where advice and counsel is fine, but demanding that they do what you say because you think you know better is not okay anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's not honoring.
That's not, honor cuts both ways.
Yes, exactly. That's what
Now,
I'm responsible. That,
I'm responsible to honor my mother and father, but as they become adults, I, as a parent, and I have 2 daughters. I've raised 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters and a son-in-law.
Yeah.
I'm responsible to honor them and their decisions that they have to make before God.
Correct. Right.
I can't make all their decisions before God. They have to make them.
Right.
And I'm responsible to honor them and their role of making decisions before God, even if I think they're wrong.
Right. Even if you think they're wrong.
Even if I
agree.
think they're wrong.
And that's part of honoring.
Now, I also honoring is not just sitting back and watching them make a dumb mistake and never say anything. Say, hey, have you considered this?
Correct.
You can say things in a way that's honoring.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's with our adult parents too.
Exactly.
And even with our kids. I think we can say things in a way that's honoring. Like, hey, have you considered that?
Yes.
If you take out this, have you considered that if you go take out a payday loan on your car, that they can come take your car from you?
So
have you considered that?
It's also, you're how to reply, how to have conversations with your aging parents to honor them so they can make good decisions. I read the book called Speaking Alzheimer's because at one point she was following all the my mom was following all the stages of Alzheimer's. We've learned now it's all medication. She had the wrong medication.
Oh, wow.
So she's not on it anymore, and she still needs assistance, but she's not in that stage. But I learned some good language to help your aging parent who's struggling with memory or making bad decisions. I always call this too much tuna. When we were moving my mother from Sanford to Jacksonville, we had to clean. She used to go to the grocery store and just buy tons and tons of food. Now, you got to think about understanding. She grew up in the Depression era when they didn't have stuff. So if something was on sale, she bought whatever she had stocked up.
Right.
Well, when we went to move her and clean out her kitchen, she had a full pantry. She had 100 cans of tuna. I quit counting at 100 cans of tuna. And I remember asking Mom, what are you doing with all this tuna? She goes, I don't have a lot of tuna. Mom, you have a lot of tuna. Well, she couldn't wheel herself in the kitchen anymore, so I took a picture. And I brought it and says, you have a lot of tuna. She goes, oh, I have a lot of tuna. Well, what I've learned now is like when we go to the grocery store and she wants to buy stuff she has at the house again, I no longer say no. I don't say you have too much anymore. I've learned to take a picture of her pantry and refrigerator before we go shopping, so that I'll say, well, what do you think? This is what you have, so what do you want to do? So again, I'm not saying no, and I'm not telling her what she has. I'm just showing her the picture of her pantry so that she can make the decision and be independent enough. To me, that's honoring.
Yeah.
That's really honoring. And she feels good about it. Oh, my goodness, I don't need any more. And I'll just, we're good. We're good to go.
I have 3 gallons of milk. I don't need another.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think about God intends for us to take care of our households. That includes our aging parents. What are the challenges? What are the challenges in today's environment, in today's culture? Because it's not common.
No.
It used to be very common for people to have their aging parents that lived in the house with them. That's not common anymore.
Yeah. I feel so honored and blessed that my parents have lived in the same state. I have friends who have parents in California, in Illinois, that they've got to fly up there to handle or to work with their parents. Everyone's different too, and then we talk about the sandwich that's people in my age are in the cookie cutter or sandwich generation, I think they call it, where you got the young kids and then the elderly parents they're trying to take care of, and then their families in between. I think those people who are in that situation struggle more than most, because especially if you've got younger children. Now, for instance, my parents didn't start the decline until after my kids were teenagers. So although I still had kids at home, I didn't have babies or small children, etc. So I was more flexible as far as that goes. But I have a friend she has three small children. I don't know how good a friend I am, 2 or 3. But I know she struggles with the guilt, again, trying to take care of her elderly parents as well as her small children. And I share with her, and I'm not sure if this is right or not, but my thought is, your parents, not that her small children need her more if she's trying to decide what time to spend, more than her parents. Now, she can do things remotely with her parents. They're not unsafe. They're not under guardianship, et cetera, et cetera. But to spend time either taking them grocery shopping or something, those sort of things can wait. Like they can wait till once a week or once every 2 weeks, whereas her children need her every day.
Sure.
So
it's prioritization.
Exactly. There you go. That's the word. What are your priorities at this certain time frame? And that'll change from year to year.
Sure.
Or especially as kids are growing, every 6 months to 6 months.
You know, Lindley, I can think of a couple of situations where there's a lady that I know whose mother-in-law was very unaccepting of her, hated her, treated her horribly, and continued to treat her that way, and now is moving into a place of dementia and is not getting better, like it's getting worse. But instead of, she ended up in a memory care facility, the mother did, but the husband wanted to bring her home to live in the house with them. And she was very, very dishonoring to this woman, like to this man's wife. The mother-in-law was very ugly, and they struggled with, what do we do? Because we want to honor my husband's mother, but she hates me, and she's going to make our home miserable. And they made the decision not to bring her into the home, but to make sure that she was taken care of.
Right.
There's no cookie cutter answers to this thing.
You're right.
But there's some difficult situations out there. There's some horribly difficult situations out there.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some legitimate reasons to not. There just are.
Yes.
I can also think of a couple whose mother and father live alternate lifestyles. Like, this is a believing couple, live an alternate lifestyle, like horribly, diametrically opposed alternate lifestyles. And anytime their family is around, they try to superimpose their views on the children over what the children are being told in their household.
Yeah, so tough decisions have to be made.
They've had to limit access to those children,
of course,
from those parents who have that ungodly, severely ungodly alternate lifestyle, and that are trying to push that agenda on these children. They've had to make a decision to limit that.
Prioritize.
They've had to prioritize. And those are horribly difficult, tedious situations. I think you really need to have wise counsel. Absolutely. I think you need to have people that you trust spiritually that help you walk you through that process, because those things are nothing to sneeze at.
Right.
I mean, like you said earlier, the commandment is honor your mother and father, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. And so there are consequences for dishonor. But you have to remember that honor and dishonor cuts both ways.
Yes.
You can't expect, I don't think you can expect to dishonor somebody for 50 years and then expect them to be warm and fuzzy about taking care of you in your old age, and then still dishonor them and them catering to you while you continue to dishonor them. But our heart attitude needs to be right. But some of these situations are very, very tedious, very difficult.
Yeah, because the Bible doesn't talk about Medicare, Medicaid, assisted living, nursing home, memory care.
Those things were not a thing.
Alzheimer's, right. It wasn't in there.
No.
So we go straight up with the word honor, and that encompasses just a myriad of things to unpack in your life.
So, if you know a visit's going to be difficult with mother and father, how do you get your mind? How do you get your mind right for that?
Breathe.
Do you like stop 15 minutes outside of town and I know.
Well,
I can only imagine some of the places that I've heard they might have to stop at the local bar 10 minutes outside to get their mind right. I was kidding with that. That's not the way to handle that. But some people probably do have to do that. Yeah.
I can, going back and forth to Mom and Dad's house over the years, there were things like I would really, when I would take Nathan's car, my CD player never worked in my car, so I would take Nathan's car, and I had these scripture CDs that I would play all the way down there, because I can remember going up to their
We
front
had the
steps.
scripture CDs when they first came out on CD too.
Yeah.
I had them too.
Yeah, they were good. They were really good to get my mind in the right place, because I can remember walking up steps and taking a deep breath. With God, all things are possible, and just going in the door and taking care of the day. That was very, very beneficial. But I also had to learn to not take, because often Mom was very verbally abusive. She was verbally abusive to my father.
Right.
And as her mind began to get worse, she was verbally abusive to us.
Right.
I had to learn to not take it personally. Now, that was not an easy thing
because it feels
for me.
personal, doesn't
yeah.
it? Yeah.
I was telling Christy that just 2 weeks ago, I uploaded an app on my phone called Keepa or something. It's a note-taking app that I had years ago that I forgot I'd had. And up come notes that I had written to my sister and brother while I was staying with my parents. We would each take turns staying with them. And I'm like going, oh my goodness, I was terrible. I was just terrible. I said, Mom was terrible tonight. This happened, this happened, this happened. I told her off. It made me feel good. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. I was so right. It did make me feel good. It did. But I'm so funny. I'm reading this 2 weeks before I know I'm going to do this podcast. I'm like,
I let them have it, and they deserved it, and I felt wonderful about the thing.
yes. Yes, it happened.
That makes you human.
It really, really happened. Oh my goodness. Then I said, I guess I'm out of the will now.
That's fantastic. I guess I'm out of the wheel. Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, so yeah, that took a bit. It really did. To learn that.
And we need to wrap up.
Okay.
With disrespect for the elderly being rampant, and it is rampant.
Yes, it is.
It is rampant in our culture. It is rampant in.
Yeah.
I've heard people say
Everywhere.
things. I just wish this generation to hurry up and die so we can take over. Things. I mean, just disrespectful. How do we combat that? What are we?
I love this.
How can we still
scripture.
honor them? How do we combat that?
Well, I love the scripture in Leviticus because I feel like this. If we just all do this, it will work out. Just love one another. But it says in Leviticus, "Stand up in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere your God, for I am the Lord." To stand up in the presence of the aged. How many people do that anymore? When someone older than them, how many people show respect for the person who's gotten to that stage in life of maturity? Instead, we see kids not even acknowledging the presence of the older generation. I think about your daughter, Caitlin. She just loves people my age.
She does. She always has.
But she has that natural gift to recognize that people in their mature ages appreciate that, and it honors them if you even just acknowledge them.
Sure.
And I've seen people in my mom taking her to the grocery store. Most people respect Mom when she comes through. She's in a wheelchair and she takes her money out. It takes her a long time to dig it out, to hand to the cashiers. But sometimes those cashiers are just like, yeah, lady, yeah, lady, yeah, lady. To me, that's disrespectful. But not at Publix. Love you, Publix. You're always good to Mom. They'll let Mom sit there and count. I got it wrong. Oh, you don't want that one. Mom pulled out an old dollar bill the other day, and she goes, oh, that's trash. And she put it in her wallet, and she handed him a clean dollar bill. And the lady just laughed, and she goes, thank you very much. She was.
Right.
It was very practical, giving them time, listening to them, letting telling stories over and over again. That's part of honoring. Looking them in the eye when you're talking to them. I do know that many times, because my mom's in a wheelchair, if we go to a restaurant, the people will talk to me
Right.
and not to Mom. And Mom gets offended.
Like, what will she have?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I will have the mashed potatoes. Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I'll have. Yeah.
So I think that's important to look them in the eye.
Those are good. You know, I think before we go, one thing that really strikes me, you know, the Bible says, whatever a man sows, that will he also reap. If you have kids and you want your kids to honor you when you get to be elderly,
Right.
they are watching how you treat your parents.
Aren't they?
They're watching it. And so to dishonor them is to put yourself in a position to receive what you've sown.
Yes.
So whatever a man sows, that will he also reap.
Right.
So I think it's the will of God that we honor our mother and father. We may not be bound to obey them in every whim they have for our lives as adults, but we don't even have to agree with them on every decision they make. But we do have to show that they have value, that they still, and especially as they get elderly in their older age, that we think that they still have value.
Exactly.
Jesus values them, and I think we should as well.
I agree. Exactly.
And that's what we learned today, and it's the truth anyway. Lindley, thank you, Pastor Lindley.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us and being with us today.
Sure.
We'll have you back again to talk about some other things. You know, there's some other things I want you to talk
There's some
about.
other things. Yes, sir.
And we'll have you back again.
Okay.
We appreciate you. We value you here. You're an amazing part of what God does here at Connect, and I wouldn't want to do this thing without you. You're a gift here. Hey, listen, thank you for being with us today on the podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, join us, share it out there. There's people that need to hear this thing, and we love you. We'll see you next time, Thursdays at 5:30. God bless you.